Hi, Geshe.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Um, I will mention again, if you want to contribute to the activity of the Dharma Friends of Israel and to support our teacher. So you have here a link in the chat that you can use. And thank you again, Geshama, for teaching us week after week. Highly
Sure.
appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Shir. And everyone, welcome everyone. Since we'll start now with the sixth chapter, which is all about emptiness, it is even more important than before that we accumulate a lot of merit, a lot of positive potential, because otherwise, there's no way we understand emptiness. And this has been stressed time and again by the great practitioners, the great masters of the past, how important it is to accumulate merit. And so, of course, I'll talk more about bodhicitta. I'll mention it again and again. And in terms of our private practice, it's important to, of course, continue with this practice, but also to start this class, I've added another prayer. So I'll do the meditation, of course, generating the motivation, all that. We'll do that. But just to give you a brief explanation of the prayer that I've added, it's very short. It's only 7 lines because it's the 7-limb prayer, the shortest version. And it's said to be one of the most powerful means and powerful methods to accumulate a lot of positive potential, a lot of merit, which then enables us to gain a better understanding of emptiness. And so this 7-limb prayer, it's actually self-explanatory. It's pretty straightforward, not hard to understand, but just to go through those 7 before we actually start. And I want to take a break from the prayer. So as before, well, first of all, we do refuge and bodhicitta. No, actually, we start with some mindfulness meditation on the breath. Then I'll guide you through a short visualization and then setting the motivation. Having done that, we then start with the prayer. So the usual prayer, refuge and bodhicitta, 3 times, then the 4 immeasurables once. Again, meditating on each line just to make sure we don't just recite them, but actually think about the meaning of each word or of each line. And then we do the 7-limb prayer. And as I said, it's not difficult. You start off with doing, well, bowing or doing prostrations, as it's usually called. But bowing here doesn't literally mean you got to get up and bow. Um, it's much more of like a paying respect, but also of opening ourselves to what we learn. And that means, and especially in Israel, I know bowing and prostrating, it's not part of the, well, Jewish tradition, Jewish religion, but it means something quite different to how it's usually seen, especially in the West. Now, oftentimes you hear the comparison to ourselves being a vessel, hearing something new, and we should be like a clean vessel that is open to hearing something else. And in that context, it kind of makes sense that we open ourselves in a way of like bowing, as in like you put the vessel lower in order for something to be poured in. So for the Dharma to be poured in, we need to be humble, we need to be open. And that openness, that humility is expressed through this prostration. So kind of bowing. And you're just saying the words, well, I don't know exactly the words yet, but reverently, usually, I mean, there are different versions of the 7-limb prayer. I don't know which one Shir is going to post, but anyway, it's going to be I reverently prostrate with body, speech, and mind. So with my body, my speech, and my mind, I open myself to something new and respectfully, humbly, I open myself to what I learn, especially with regard to emptiness. And I opened myself to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the great masters of the past, who have actualized what I learn here today. And then after that, you make offerings. You visualize that you offer, well, whatever is there, possibly your own body, speech, and mind, your own practice in that way. So that's an offering, an actual offering. And then you also imagine, you visualize other offerings, anything you could think of, just offer it as giving something, receiving the Dharma from Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the form of Chandrakirti's text here. But of course, Chandrakirti, of course, received teachings from other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So in that way, and the Buddha himself, of course, indirectly receiving teachings, receiving the teachings that the Buddha set forth. So in that way, you prostrate, you make offerings, you give something from your own side to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That's the offering. And then after that, you confess whatever non-virtues you've accumulated. Well, confess in the sense that's what the words say, but really it's generating strong regret for whatever non-virtue, whatever obstacle I've basically created for myself with these non-virtuous actions, an obstacle to understanding, to comprehending emptiness, to comprehending, well, to practicing the path in general, but in particular to understanding selflessness or emptiness. So generating regret for whatever actions, the ones I remember, the ones I don't remember. And then thereafter, you rejoice, you take a moment. And what I'm saying now, you have a few moments. I take a break between each line, giving you the chance to actually shortly meditate on the meaning of each line. So having done prostrations, having made offerings, having generated regret for our negative actions, next is rejoicing. So to take a moment to rejoice from the depth of your heart in all the positive actions other Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, ordinary beings have accumulated. So to just take that moment of pure joy in what they've done. Also a very powerful method to accumulating a lot of positive potential. And then you request the great spiritual masters who in the form of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Karmapa, and all the other great lamas who are still around. So you request them to remain until the end of samsara, until the end of cyclic existence. So you make that deep request to have a long life and to be around for as long as possible as being living examples of the Dharma, of being able to actually learn the Dharma through their example. And then you request them to continue teaching, to turn the wheel of Dharma. That is to continue teaching, to continue to spread their insights, which for us is still theory, but for them has become praxis. For them, it's become actuality. It's what they've understood and they're now sharing with us. So for them to continue doing exactly that, continuing teaching. And then lastly, dedicating our own virtue, but also the virtue of others, which of course, literally, we cannot dedicate others' virtue, but in a way, indirectly, we wish for others to become enlightened. And so this act of dedicating our own and others' virtue is for the sake of, well, becoming enlightened ourselves to take others to that same state. And again, you create a lot of positive potential doing this kind of dedication. All right, so that should be enough. We'll have some time to think about it. But yes, so it's important to not just read the words, but more important than that is to actually meditate briefly on the meaning, to accumulate enough merit to make the teachings on Chandrakirti's text most effective. Okay, so let's start then the usual way with just some breathing meditation. And then to be inspired, visualize in the space in front of you Buddha Shakyamuni, who appears in the form of a fully ordained monk, and who's of one nature with your personal lamas. And also visualize that surrounding the Buddha are the great masters of India and Tibet, in particular Nagarjuna, Ayadeva, Bhavaviveka, Buddhapalita, Chandakirti, and so forth. All of them inseparable from the main visualization, the Buddha, and also inseparable from your own spiritual Lama. And then think that you're surrounded by all sentient beings. And now, in the presence of these great beings who are inseparable from your Lama, and in the presence of all those sentient beings, think that I have this opportunity now to practice the Dharma, to transform my mind. And may this result in me attaining the fully enlightened state for a Buddha, the fully enlightened state of a Buddha. So that I'll be able to be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. So that I'll be able to lead other sentient beings towards liberation as well as full enlightenment. For this, I turn towards the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma as well as the Buddha and the Sangha. And I strengthen my bodhicitta with the following prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And then the four measurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And then the 7 limb prayer. And for that, just remind yourself of the visualization you did earlier. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time. And rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence. And turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of others to the great enlightenment. Okay. All right, so continue with the text. Last time I read the first line, the first verse of the 6th chapter, and then we'll continue with the rest. Well, with a few verses more. But throughout this week, as I said, it's extremely important to accumulate a lot of positive potential. Now, I think I've mentioned it. This positive potential, this positive karma or merit, whatever you want to call it, it's really difficult to grasp, really difficult to understand. What does that actually mean? I'm pretty sure, I'm very sure that, of course, there's a scientific way to analyze that, but for that, we need to actually understand this merit. And right now, well, it's a very subtle phenomenon, and I guess none of us can actually perceive, well, let alone another person's merit, but our own merit. However, certain beings who have, well, some of our lamas who have certain clairvoyant abilities, they definitely can perceive, not just in their own case, but in terms of our kind of positive potential, how much there is, how much more we need to accumulate, how many obstacles they are, and according to that, they give us advice. So it is possible to perceive it, but only then can you actually scientifically, well, scientifically in the sense you could share with another person, talk about it, well, measure it if you like, but of course only if you perceive it. Like scientists, they measure something, they analyze it, but only once they've actually there's something that they perceive. Now, for us right now, we just take it on faith, if you like, that there is something like positive potential. However, we can generate an experience of that. And someone who talks a lot about this is Geshe Kelsang. He, in his teaching, stresses this a lot, the need for accumulating this positive potential and at the same time purifying negativities, purifying whatever negative potential we've created, and enhancing or accumulating more positive potential. Now, it's hard to understand, but there is an analogy that's sometimes given. It's like a capital you have in the bank. If you want to start a business, some enterprise, something, you need some money that enables you to now start this business, to get what is needed in order to be, well, successful and get everything going. Now, similar positive potential is like an internal capital. It's to do with the mind, of course, and it's left with the mind. There are like some imprints left in the mind, and these imprints having different functions. Well, we talk about here in particular, positive potential has the function to enable us to fulfill that which we aspire. Now, in day-to-day language, we say this person is lucky. When someone sets out to do something and whatever they do, they're successful in what they do, they're able to well, see it through, in that there are some obstacles possibly, but maybe no obstacles whatsoever. And very smoothly, they're able to do whatever they set out to do. Now, here we're not talking about ordinary kind of endeavors, ordinary activities, but of course, the activity of practicing the Dharma. And for that, we need to be lucky in that way. So, lucky really is another way of saying having enough positive potential to to reduce in that way, the more positive potential you have, the more obstacles are reduced, in that they cannot actually create an obstacle to you, or you can easily overcome it. And also, whatever you do to accumulate more merit also serves to reduce any kind of obstacle, any kind of ripening of a negative potential, if you like. So negative karma in that sense. Therefore, positive potential or merit or positive karma, well, those mean basically the same thing, just different words for it. And then the opposite, of course, is negative karma, absence of merit or obstacles for that matter. Negative potential and so forth. And as I said earlier, we need to accumulate a lot of merit in a very powerful way. In fact, Right now, I'm translating songs of spiritual experience into German, so I'm going a lot through this text, and there are these lines talking about bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, and this very beautiful line that really struck me was basically Lama Tsongkhapa says that um, bodhicitta is like an elixir that transforms iron into gold, in that every action is transformed into the two accumulations, into the two collections, so merit and wisdom. In other words, when you talk about merit or positive potential, you can divide it into positive potential that you accumulate through um, any aspect that is part of the method side, so love, compassion, generosity, and so forth. And then the positive potential or the merit you accumulate through engaging in any activity that's associated with the wisdom side. And what he says is, Labhatokapa explains that anything done with bodhicitta, so if you generate bodhicitta, any action that you do, and if it's just ordinary as washing your car and, I don't know, cleaning the floor, whatever you do, brushing your teeth, it becomes part of the accumulation of merit and wisdom. In other words, you're accumulating merit and wisdom because of your motivation. So it's like that which transforms this kind of mystical elixir that takes elixir, or I don't know, potion that you use to take ordinary metal and transform it into gold. So just that those lines are so beautiful. Again, talking about bodhicitta, the importance of bodhicitta, not just that it's one of the causes to become enlightened, but everything we touch turns into gold. In other words, whatever we do with this motivation, it'll become a cause to enlightenment. It'll become, well, part of the accumulation of merit and wisdom. It mentions both collections. So in other words, it enables us, the more we familiarize with bodhicitta, the more we're able, of course, to accumulate what we need to generate more wisdom. So the accumulation of merit and wisdom. So both of them, therefore, also generating the accumulation of wisdom and thereby enabling ourselves, well, to realize emptiness, to realize, well, merit and wisdom needing both. So method and wisdom both, accumulating both, and in that way, being able to generate an understanding of emptiness. Which is why, again, as part of this week, so important, whenever you get up in the morning, first thing should be bodhicitta. Just think of what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says time and again. Bodhicitta in the morning when you get up, last thing you do when you fall asleep, to generate the mind of enlightenment just before falling asleep, so that even your sleep, even however many hours we sleep, that even that practice where consciously we do very little, we do nothing in general, becomes part of the collection of merit and wisdom. But also, since we need a lot of merit to practice the sixth chapter, to not just learn about it, but also apply it to our own life and to understand it, therefore, let's make this week a week of accumulating merit for lazy practitioners, which is just another way of saying of rejoicing, to spend a lot of time rejoicing in the positive potential others have created. So of the 7 limbs, it was one of the limbs, and it's said to be one of the most powerful and actually easiest ways, of course, after bodhicitta, but just another way by which you can very easily, very quickly accumulate a lot of merit, which is rejoicing, deeply rejoicing, feeling happy from the depth of your heart for all the success, in particular spiritual success of other sentient beings. I mean, any virtue, any virtuous action, any, of course, spiritual action, in the sense, of course, if it's combined with bodhicitta and renunciation. So anything, even if you can't, I mean, you can't think of it as in, like, you don't perceive the spiritual action, but just as an abstract, like, think of any virtuous actions of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, ordinary beings, and rejoice in it. So that is said to be an extremely powerful way to accumulate merit. And It's also, well, it's, if we really do that, it's meant to become a very joyful, or it can become a very joyful week if you really remember this. Because I mean, the side effect of that is that you're just rejoicing, you feel happy, which just makes our life, especially at this day and age, so much easier if there's more joy. And there's so many great beings of the past, great beings, even right now, even if you can't perceive them, even if in other universes or in other galaxies and so forth. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, they talk about, especially the Buddhas talk about other world systems where there are other great beings. So if you actually can expand your mind in that way and deeply rejoice in all the virtuous actions of ordinary and special beings. Okay, so that should enable you to accumulate a lot of positive potential and help help all of us here to continue with our study of this text. All right, so that's for this week. And then to continue with the first few verses, they're not that difficult to understand. It's basically an introduction to Chandrakirti's explanation of emptiness. That is actually, this is, and I mentioned this last time, this is the part where Chandrakirti now actually explains Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. Previously, and it's almost like it's a text on its own. So previously, the first 5 verses were a commentary, were an explanation of the well of Nagarjuna's Ratnavali. Not really an explanation of them, but they were based on Ratnavali, on the text Precious Garland. In particular, well, the explanation on the 5 perfections, except for emptiness, or except for wisdom. And so, having supplemented his explanation of Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom with the method aspect, now Chandrakirti starts with this section, which is the greatest part. This is the most extensive chapter of this text. And he actually starts it in a way like an independent text, and we'll come to that in a moment. But as I said, it basically now sets forth Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. It explains important aspects of that text. And again, supplementing it, but differently, not from the method, not with regard to the method aspect, but with regard to the profound aspect, that is the wisdom aspect. All right. Okay, but before doing that, there's a small introduction. So first, there's a praise of the perfection of wisdom, of this practice, perfection of wisdom. Oh, there is, yeah. So the perfection of wisdom, that realization of emptiness, mainly realization of emptiness. So then it says, just as a single man with eyes can easily lead a group of blind men to their desired destination, here too intelligence leads the sightless virtues and guides them to the conqueror state. All right, so the first verse we did last time, I talked about why the practice of wisdom is preeminent on that level, on the 6th level of a bodhisattva. I talked about the special meditative equipoise. We discussed this last time. Don't need to explain that again. But now, here what Chandrakirti says is he praises wisdom by saying, well, the other perfections are like blind people who want to go somewhere, but being able to walk, they're unable to see where they're going. Therefore, what they need is they need a person with eyes. They need someone who's got eyes. They need wisdom that takes them to that goal. Now, this verse can actually be taken in 2 ways. So just as a single pass, like just as a group of blind people, if they want to go somewhere, they need someone who sees, who's got the intelligence, who's got the insight. So here it's not literally seeing with your eyes, but internal insight. So just as you need that, here too, intelligence, that is wisdom, understanding. And intelligence doesn't always, sometimes in the Buddhist context, intelligence in the scriptures, there's a word for that that's different to wisdom, but it's kind of like the beginning. It's like what you need, kind of an insight. It's not the deepest kind of primordial wisdom we're talking about, but something that leads you to that level. So we need that kind of understanding. For someone who's got that understanding, the intelligence leads. So that this understanding, initially it's an understanding that leads the sightless virtues and guides them to the conqueror state. So here too, intelligence that becomes this deepest wisdom that takes virtues such as generosity, ethical conduct, patience, and so forth, takes all of those to the conqueror states. Now, this verse can be taken in two ways. In one way, you could say, well, for any kind of virtue, any virtuous action that is part of the method aspect, for instance, of course, compassion, love, but also the perfection of generosity, of ethical conduct, and so forth, you need a certain degree of understanding and wisdom. Of course, compassion, if you want to benefit someone, just the wish for them to be free from suffering. So, just to be practical in everyday life, if you want to help someone, well, how can I help them? You need to have that understanding, that wisdom to help them effectively. Just love and compassion, well, they're wonderful. But if I want to help someone, I need to know how. Now, I'm not talking about enlightenment here. I'm just talking about on a day-to-day level, generosity. Yeah, if I want to practice generosity, what am I going to give? I'm going to give something that's helpful, that's not harming them, and so forth. So in that way, it makes perfect sense, of course, on the just day-to-day level, on the day-to-day basis. We need a certain understanding, insight into what is beneficial, etc. And in that way, then act upon our love, compassion, and so forth. But there's an even deeper, a more profound level on how wisdom is important. And that's the actual meaning, of course, of this text here, is that a lot of virtues, positive states of mind we're practicing, like part of the method aspect of Buddhist practice. That is, I've mentioned it, love, compassion, um, rejoicing, confessing non virtues, patience, generosity, and so forth. So, all these positive states of mind, well, with them, we accumulate a lot of merit, of course, and they act as an antidote to what is actually harming us. What is harming us? Our afflictive emotions, aversion, anger, attachment, desire, and so forth. They act as antidotes, but they're limited in their function of acting as an antidote. Limited in that, however strong our love and compassion are, this love and this compassion cannot totally eradicate our anger, our aversion. It cannot totally eradicate any of the afflictive emotions. Number one, plus love and compassion as an antidote to, for instance, anger. Well, it is limited in that it can only reduce anger. It cannot eliminate anger. Anyway, I've already mentioned that. But on top of that, it's only an antidote to anger. It's not an antidote to attachment. It's not an antidote to stinginess. Well, it can serve, of course. It can make us more generous, of course. But in general, mainly it's an antidote to anger and not to all the other afflictive emotions. Therefore, these virtuous aspects that are not wisdom, they serve as antidotes to certain states of mind that harm us. But as I said, they cannot totally reduce those harmful states of mind. Moreover, they're limited in what they can affect. Therefore, we need wisdom. We need wisdom which together with these virtuous state of mind, these virtuous ways, these virtuous states of mind, first of all, enable us to generate the kind of wisdom we need. So without them, without starting with them, we will never be able to generate the type of wisdom that is necessary here. However, once through these other virtuous actions that are part of the method side, we have accumulated enough merit, enough positive potential to remove, which is strong enough to remove the obstacles to understanding, well, selflessness, emptiness, which the understanding of which is the kind of wisdom we're actually looking for here. There are different types of wisdom, but this is the actual wisdom we're here addressing. That type of wisdom of understanding the ultimate nature of all phenomena. That's what we're aiming for. Well, why? Very simple. Because the misapprehension of reality on its deepest level, holding on to phenomena existing in and of itself inherently, well, that gives rise to all the other afflictive emotions, which is why it's pretty simple. Well, theoretically, very simple, explaining it at least, it's not that complicated, that if we have an antidote to that root misapprehension, which gives rise to all the other negative aspects, negative states of mind, harmful states of mind, well, that mind, if we can eliminate that with the wisdom, with the understanding of reality, which is the direct antidote to this misapprehension of reality, if we can remove that misapprehension, we remove everything that this misapprehension potentially can give rise to. Therefore, in the end, we need this wisdom. There's no way around it. And that is why here in the first way in which I explained this verse, okay, if you want to make these virtues most effective, you need to have some certain understanding how you can be beneficial. But taking it as part of, or taking the second type of interpretation, well, these virtues can take us this far, but then in order to progress on the path, we need to have an understanding of emptiness. We need to have the wisdom that realizes emptiness, which can now actually start eliminating the misapprehensions, those different levels of them. There are coarser levels, there are subtler levels. Our misapprehension of reality has become so deeply ingrained in our mind that just a single session of realizing how phenomena really exist will not suffice to eliminate these different levels of holding on to inherent existence. And we need, therefore, different levels. We need to deepen our wisdom, or strengthen our wisdom through the method aspect. It continuously assists this wisdom to deepen it or strengthen it, making it stronger and stronger, so that we can eliminate deeper and deeper levels of this root misapprehension, and therefore of the afflictive emotions these different apprehensions potentially give rise to, until once we've eliminated all misapprehensions, all we're left with is the subtle imprints, like a residue that was left by these misapprehensions, each single misapprehension leaving these imprints on our mind. And so at that point, our wisdom has become so strong that, and of course, assisted only by bodhicitta and all the other minds that are part of the method aspect of the path. Now, assisted by them, this wisdom has become so strong that now those are also eliminated until there's nothing left to eliminate, which means the state of a Buddha. All right, so having given you that just short explanation, therefore, we can understand that the wisdom are the eyes that actually take us towards our goal. Without them, our misapprehension of reality will be like a blind virtues blind people, in that they do accumulate love, compassion, they generate them, they increase them, but without wisdom, no way we reach our goal. So this is really what verse number 2 of the 6th chapter is saying, that therefore we need this, these sightless virtues need to be complemented, they need to be brought together with wisdom. Okay. And then the text goes on to say, well, first, there's like an outline, there's like a heading. It says that suchness or emptiness of the profound dependent originations. So now it's saying, well, we need to understand the emptiness of the profound dependent arising that is to be seen, that we need to see, and that has 5 parts. First, it starts off with promising to explain the profound truth. Now, this is usually seen at the beginning of a text. There's usually a promise to compose the text. And as I said, this is why the 6th chapter seems to be like a separate kind of text in itself, in that there was no promise to compose this text at the beginning of entry into the middle way, which is usually the case. In the very beginning, you have a promise, but there's none given. But here it's given. So Chandrakirti basically saying, well, now I'm explaining you the meaning of Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, and here's the promise: I will compose this text. I will compose this explanation. So here it goes. One who has realized the utterly profound truth through scripture and through reasoning as well was the noble Nagarjuna. So who is understood? Who are we talking about here? Now we're talking about Nagarjuna as noble, like Arya Nagarjuna, someone who's realized emptiness directly. Noble is just another word for saying someone who's realized emptiness directly. So we're dealing now with his explanation. And Nagarjuna, who was he? He was someone who's realized ultimate reality through scripture, of course, through what the Buddha said, but even more importantly, through logical reasoning. Okay, which of the two, of course, is more important? If you have scripture versus reasoning, reasoning is much more important. This is an important aspect which is quite different from possibly other spiritual systems, in that from a Buddhist point of view, whatever the Buddha says, well, it's not enough that the Buddha says phenomena don't exist inherently, or phenomena do not, they're changing moment by moment. In other systems, it's said that's enough. I mean, the goal is different in other traditions, in other religious system, in other spiritual systems. The goal is a different one. And so it's often said that, well, the proof that this is so and so is given because God said so. And that is enough. For other religions, that is sufficient. But in Buddhism, what is different is that in Buddhism, liberation, again, whether there's actual liberation in other systems is to be seen, but in Buddhism, of course, there's great emphasis on liberation, and liberation is only possible through a correct understanding, realization, a direct experience of reality. And that direct experience is not possible merely through the words of the Buddha. So phenomena don't exist inherently because the Buddha said so. So taking that as a correct reason, well, believing that to be a reason, it is so because someone said so. The Buddha said so, or Lama said so. Even if the Lama, of course, the Buddha anyway, but even if a Lama has realized it, that will not be effective. It may inspire us to hear more and to think about aspects more, but no way can those words lead to a realization. So we need other types of reasoning, logic. We need logical understandings or logical reasonings, such as the reasoning of dependent origination, of the different reasons that are actually provided, well, as part of this text here, in order to realize what the Buddha has said, but indirectly. Buddha's speech, at some point, we leave it behind, in that we now need to make it our own. As I keep saying, as in like really going through what is meant with this, what is it, so it becomes your own. You really internalize it, and only then, when you've applied the different reasonings, and not just one reason, sometimes it's very simply presented. It says, oh, for instance, you yourself as a person, you don't exist inherently because you're dependently arisen. As if just thinking about this once, okay, so it's formulated in the form of a syllogism, which is called syllogism. A is B because it's C. So in other words, I'm trying to understand, me, a person, I want to understand that I don't exist inherently. That's B. I don't exist inherently. How do I understand that? On the basis of a reason. So when I say reasoning, I'm talking about a logical reason. What is that logical reason? For instance, the fact that I don't exist inherently. That is a logical reasoning, a logical reason that can establish to me, for my mind, in my mind, that I don't exist inherently. Now that sounds so simple. Does that mean I just kind of go, oh, I don't exist inherently because I don't exist because I exist interdependently, or I'm a dependently arisen phenomenon. Of course, that it doesn't work that way. You need a lot more analysis and understanding each aspect. What does it mean to be inherently existent? What does it mean not to exist that way? How does interdependence um, come into that? How does it explain it, and so forth? Therefore, it requires a lot of analysis. And that analysis was done by great masters such as Nagarjuna, taking Buddha's words, first of all, and then internalizing them, making these words his own, in that he gained first an understanding of what the Buddha said through reasoning, mainly through reasoning, but of course, other aspects, accumulating a lot of merit, engaging a lot of positive meritorious actions, as previously explained. So many, many causes and conditions giving rise to that, until eventually the Buddha gained understanding, first-hand experience of what the Buddha, Nagarjuna gained first-hand experience of what the Buddha had taught, wrote it down in the form of the fundamental wisdom, and in that way, basically serving as a commentary of what the Buddha said when he taught the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So really what we're learning is the meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras that were explained by Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, and that were again explained by Chandakirti. So it's a commentary of a commentary on the sutras. Now, some people say, well, why not practice? Why not go back to the sutras themselves? Why not study the sutras directly? Well, the problem is that those sutras were taught at a time when the style of teaching, when the way they were set forth was totally suitable for the people at the time. But people have changed, the style of teaching has changed. So it's really hard to understand the sutras just in and of themselves. It's just like trying to read now in the 20th century, trying to read Shakespeare. I mean, the English has changed, the way Shakespeare expressed himself has changed. So without any explanation, no way can we understand after reading, I don't know, if you grow up reading comics your whole life and maybe the newspaper, and then try to read Shakespeare's writing, well, just as you won't be able to do that unless you receive some explanation. In the same way, we need these commentaries to then, of course, understand the meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So that's what Nagarjuna, so basically Chandakirti opens up Nagarjuna's explanation, and through Nagarjuna's explanation, well, he opens up understanding that this opens up for us the meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So if you understand Chandakirti, you understand Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, and you understand the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So they're just like a doorway, if you like, to the understanding of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So it's not like we're ignoring the sutras, but we're using these writings, these commentaries, to untangle the meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras that is not immediately obvious. And they're like, the writings, oftentimes they're described as keys, like a key to open a box. So in the same way, to have access to something that is close to us right now, which are the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, just as we need a key um, to open a certain, like a treasure box, we need the key, and they're often described as the key, the golden key of this and the golden key of that. So certain commentaries are actually named, giving that name, because it's just like the key that opens up these different the different meanings of particular the sutras. And Nagarjuna was so incredible, and now we don't have the time to go through it. Actually, at this point, our teachers would tell us the life story of Nagarjuna, of how he was. There was a prophecy, it was prophesied by the Buddha himself, that he would come one day and clarify what he had taught and bring the Prajnaparamita Sutras back into mainstream Buddhism as they used to be, but they were lost for a while. And so kind of re-explaining them and giving people access to them again. But you can read on this, like there's an explanation given in Lama Tsongkhapa's text that was made available to you, and there are lots of other sources, so no need for me to go through it. However, this promise to explain this text is mentioning Nagarjuna here. And then in verse 4 of the entry into the middle way, it says, This is now identifying the person, the vessel to expound the profound path. So I talked about ourselves as being vessels. Remember, initially I tried to explain the need for bowing, prostrating, which is more an internal process of kind of opening ourselves, lowering ourselves to receive information. But here it talks about who's a vessel for emptiness. Now, well, nowadays, I guess people don't consider it to be such a big issue in a way, but of course it is still important, because teaching emptiness for those who hear about emptiness who are not vessels, who are not appropriate vessels, in the sense that it can actually harm them. Well, either they don't understand it, they think it's well, they don't understand anything and they just ignore it. Okay, that's the least problematic. Or they generate a view like, oh my god, that's just so much rubbish, I don't want to hear anything about that. Well, that would be for them like closing their internal door to something so precious. In that way, it could possibly harm them, depending on how long they hold on to, I don't want to hear about this. Or it could actually lead to really wrong views, if people take it to a level of believing, well, there's actions, well, previously believing my actions have consequences, but no, since there's no inherent action, then there's no consequence, really. There's no real consequence. If only to extreme of nothingness, there's nothing there, which of course is not what this is talking about. Well, that would also be a problem. So I guess it's pretty obvious that yes, it can be misunderstood. It is a very difficult concept, one of the most difficult concepts in Buddhism. Well, they're more difficult concepts, but these other concepts, they're not necessarily, we don't necessarily need to understand them. It's not required of us to realize them. But this, in order to progress on the path towards enlightenment, it's an absolute must. I mean, we have to realize this. Otherwise, no way we can progress, even just from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation. And although that's far from where we are right now, but well, we need to start somewhere, and definitely here get used to this idea, and therefore it's important to be a vessel, an appropriate vessel. So here, an appropriate vessel, a person who's someone who we should definitely definitely listen to emptiness, or receive the teachings. It can even be an ordinary person. So here it says, even ordinary persons, when hearing about emptiness. So let's say in this life you hear about it for the first time. If there's sheer joy, you experience this moment of joy. So maybe the first time you've heard about this in this lifetime, maybe you remember, there's a moment of sheer joy again and again within your heart. And such joy that you react with tears filling your eyes. Now, tears, of course, not out of sadness, but out of joy. And even stronger than that, there's just something like, sometimes when something touches us greatly, we don't know to react other than through crying, that is, through tearing up, and our eyes filling up with tears and so forth. So here, tears born of such joy, when they fill their eyes and their hair stands up in their follicles. Anyway, I mean, their hair stand up on their skin, like when we're like totally like moved by something to such an extent that our hair stand up on our body, like stand on end, our hair stand on end. Well, out of joy, like as an expression of joy, or being, well, having reached a moment when it's just right, that the time is just right for us to hear the teachings. Well, for that person, for that kind of person, this is the right kind of vessel. And of course, for a lama, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama or other great beings, when they teach, they have these insights. I mean, His Holiness definitely has, if His Holiness is not omniscient, definitely has omniscient, not omniscient, clairvoyant abilities, and so do have a lot of other lamas. So they sometimes talk to just what we perceive as ordinary people who have no idea of Buddhism. They talk about this, but of course, with their insights that this is the right path and these are the right kind of people to teach emptiness. So in that case, they're pretty safe, whoever is listening to that. In my case, well, if you feel like, well, emptiness is not the right thing, better switch off your computer, like leave Zoom. Um, don't listen to it, because I cannot judge whether you're a vessel or not. I have no idea. Um, I'm basically just sharing with you the very little of what I understand about this text. But in any case, so it's therefore up to us. Do we consider ourselves to be this kind of person to listen about that, to listen to the Dharma? I mean, best case scenario, to be overjoyed, great. Well, if not, at least having an interest and openness to it, great. Then we're a vessel for emptiness. And Nagarjuna himself, he says that if one falsely views emptiness, so he mentions it in his fundamental wisdom, Nagarjuna, sorry, Lama Tsongkhapa also says it. I'm just reading what Lama Tsongkhapa mentions in his commentary, quoting Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. So if one falsely views emptiness, those of weak intelligence will be doomed. Just like handling a snake erroneously, like if you wrongly handle a snake, it can actually bite you, or just like a spell gone wrong. Like maybe you think of Harry Potter if you've ever read his books or seen the movies when a spell goes wrong. So you can actually harm yourself with a spell, with like some kind of magical spell. All right. Such people, therefore, so this is the danger of like teaching it to the wrong person, but those people who are actual vessel to hear emptiness, well, such people have the seed of perfect Buddhahood. They are the perfect vessels for this teaching. To them you should teach the sublime ultimate truth. Okay, so this is Chandrakirti saying, it's talking about the right kind of vessel. And then it goes on to say how from this, how higher qualities ensue, that is, result from the explanation on emptiness. So how high qualities ensue if this is expounded. If the person is the right vessel, well, that leads to all sorts of great qualities. The text goes on to say, for them, the ensuing qualities will come forth. Come to birth, sorry. Where is it? Yeah, for them, the ensuing qualities will come to birth. Adopting perfect morality, they will always abide by it. Okay, if you understand emptiness, if you understand how phenomena really exist, well, you will adopt perfect morality. There's no way you will harm others. You will engage in harmful actions. And as an understanding, once you've understood that, you will always abide by it. They will practice generosity. Those who understand emptiness, once you understand emptiness, of course you practice generosity. You'll understand that greed or stinginess comes from a misapprehension of the self and others, and therefore you be generous and cultivate compassion. So in other words, previously we talked about these qualities as creating the right kind of conditions for the wisdom understanding emptiness to arise. But once that has arisen, then again, the understanding of emptiness will strengthen these qualities. In fact, they strengthen each other at all time. The more you practice generosity, love, compassion, the stronger your understanding, your better understanding. You better your understanding of how phenomena really exist, the stronger these qualities. And as long as the Dalai Lama stresses this all the time, that the afflictive emotions have no grounding in reality. But positive emotions, positive states of mind, love, compassion, generosity, they can be, of course, can be influenced by the misapprehension of reality. Yeah, you can be very compassionate out of great attachment towards another person. That is possible. But even without attachment, without desire, in fact, without desire, without attachment, without any of these negative emotions, these afflictive emotions, love and compassion and generosity will be much more effective. So they can be influenced by misapprehensions of reality, the wrong view, that's the misconception of reality, yes, but they don't need to be. And in fact, they grow much stronger if they're based on the correct view. Therefore, states of minds that are benefiting us, that lead to happiness, are in sync with reality. And it's only those afflictive emotions that are not in sync with reality. And therefore, they're quite limited. They're very limited in comparison to the two. Love, compassion are much more powerful because they're rooted in reality. And hatred and so forth, however strong it is limited. It's limited in many different ways, and limited in that, of course, other people don't approve of it, limited in that it gives suffering, limited in that it cannot grow as strong as love and compassion. Love and compassion are much more limited. Love and compassion grow much stronger. So sometimes people argue, well, anger gives you a lot of energy. Well, but love and compassion gives you much more energy. So the energy you get from anger, yeah, well, maybe in the spur of the moment, the anger gets you to get up and, I don't know, defend your family or what have you. However, that's just a very short kind of spur, like a short kind of moment of a short-lived energy that is very exhausting in the long term, whereas love and compassion gives a lasting and continuous uh, energy that helps, that enables us much more effectively to protect our family, but also to protect whoever else is involved. Okay, so therefore, love and compassion is, there's no limit to it in that sense. But what's also important, and I think I've mentioned that before, anger is limited in that you can only be angry with a limited amount of people and only for a limited time. It's like anger is so exhausting that you're angry maybe for a few hours and then you just let it go. At least you go to sleep or you do something else, and the anger can no longer be active. um, well, while you're dreaming, maybe, but in your waking state, it's like it's too exhausting. It's too exhausting. It's really bad for your health and so forth. While love and compassion, once you have it, um, meditation, like through meditation, if it's been enhanced through familiarity, well, then it can be with you the whole time, and in fact makes you stronger, gives you more energy. It can be with you at full times. And what is more, with anger and hatred and so forth, you can only be angry and hateful towards a certain amount of people. It's just you. I mean, there's this abstract idea, I hate everyone, but you don't really. I mean, you have this abstract idea of everyone, but with each and every person, to really hate them, it's impossible. So you may hate one person, but then everyone else, well, if you don't love them, but at least you I mean, you may not love them, but you at least, or without loving them, but you don't care about them. So, of course, there's some you love, some you hate, and then the rest you don't care about. But the point here is that, with regard to this hatred, if you really see the person, like really hating someone, not this abstract idea of everyone that doesn't have anything to do with reality, but if you hate a certain amount of people, you can't hate more. It's just no way. It's too exhausting. Whereas love and compassion, you can love and have compassion towards everyone, even if you don't really know them. Like you have no, just the fact that they're a sentient being, automatically you love them. So in that sense, you can love all sentient beings, even though you don't know all sentient beings. It actually means that the moment you meet them, this love is there. Like in that moment, you perceive them, and right away you know of their existence, and your love and compassion is there. So you can't just meet someone and hate them already. Like no way, it's just not going to work. So in that way, you see, it's totally limited. Totally limited. Hatred is so limited. Um, Anger is so limited. Attachment is so limited. While love and compassion are so expansive. Why? Because they're rooted in reality. Okay, so very important. Therefore, it makes sense, once you have the greater understanding of reality you have, the stronger practice of generosity. You'll cultivate compassion, as it says. So, adopting perfect morality, they will always abide by it. They will practice generosity and cultivate compassion. They will practice forbearance, patience or forbearance, and will dedicate thoroughly their virtue to freedom for all beings. So all these qualities arise from that. They will revere those who aspire to perfect awakening. All right. So all these qualities will naturally rise for what is now for us still artificial, very hard to do. We need a lot of effort. Once you understood reality, it just flows out of yourself, if you like. All right. Now, verse 6, 7, now 7, it's now urging us to listen. So those who are suitable vessels, if you consider yourself to be a suitable vessel, now listen. It's important. And again, this is usually done at the very beginning of a text, but Chantakirti puts it here, kind of stressing the importance of this part now. All right. Gaining mastery of ways profound and vast, such persons will gradually attain the ground of perfect joy. So all those who thus aspire, pray listen to this path. Now really pay attention. All right. All right. And so then the next verse, 8, is actually starting with emptiness. This is already going right into it. It's actually, the next part is now explaining emptiness of phenomena. Emptiness of phenomena. Now, before we can get there, you see Lama Tsongkhapa's text gives a lot of explanation first. Now, I don't want to give you all this explanation because, well, we don't have the same time that you ordinarily have when you study this text. A little bit I want to give you, and then we'll very quickly start with this next verse number 8. But what I want to say is this. So ordinarily what is explained at this point is, you get the explanation. What is explained is the concept of emptiness. In other words, of what is the object of negation? That is what is introduced here. If you talk about emptiness, well, emptiness really just means a phenomenon that refers to the negation of something that doesn't exist, has never existed, but that we wrongly believe, wrongly perceive to exist, and which is the main object of our misapprehension, our misconception of reality. Now, this we need to identify. If our wisdom is a type of mind that understands the emptiness, the lack of this certain quality, what is that quality? And that is identified here in 2 stages. First, what is talking about the Madhyamika school. The Madhyamika school is divided into Svatantrika and Prasangika. And Lama Tsongkhapa, for instance, explains first, what does the Svatantrika school say when it comes to emptiness? I won't talk about this here because it takes a lot of time. You can read it on your own if you like, and it'll come up as part of explaining emptiness anyway. So then the next part would be explaining the object of negation. What is it we're trying to negate here? And this is just a course explanation as an introduction to this first verse of the explanation of the 6th chapter, which goes into emptiness, which is verse number 8. Everything before that was just an introduction. So what is the object to be negated? Well, in a few words, I won't be able to finish this explanation today, but I'll give you a little bit just so we have something also to meditate on. It talks about the fact that, well, it talks about an object such that the way we perceive anything that it exists. So it's not saying that things don't exist. Of course they exist, but they seem to have a certain quality to them. It seems that they exist, first of all, independently of our own mind. So nothing to do with my own mind. It seems my mind just perceives what is there, that I'm like just an observer of what's going on around me. So this sense that there's an object and I just kind of see what is there. So the other day I overheard this commercial. It was a car commercial, and the person talking about, oh my God, the stuff they say in car commercials. So it was saying we all perceive the same world, but we see it differently. So I was thinking, we all perceive the same world. So that's implying that there's an objective world. We all see that world, it's all objectively, but we see it differently. And that is our sense of reality. That commercial actually reflected our sense of reality. There's this world out there, this objective world that's over there, and we perceive it, but we just see it differently. It feels totally right to us when we hear that, right? It makes total sense to us. Well, there's no problem with the second claim, with the second explanation, or claim, if you like, saying that we all see it differently. Yeah, well, that's true. But saying we all see the same world, Well, we don't see the same world because there is no such world, such objective world that exists separate from our mind. In other words, reality or this world is a summary of each and everyone's view. So what I perceive and you perceive and everyone else perceives, well, that is the world. In other words, there's no objective world other than that. Because if it were there, well, we should be able to find it. And well, even if it was there, I mean, like, no one perceives it. In what way could there be such an objective world? So that is one way of saying that kind of objective reality that exists over there, and I just happen to see it. That objective world, it means if it really existed, that would mean it exists independently. Because if it's like it says in this commercial, so we all see it differently, well, there's this independent entity that exists independent of my mind, and I just perceive it differently. So what I perceive, that depends on my mind. And what you perceive depends on your mind, but there's still this objective world that's over there. And that must exist independently in that it's not dependent on me perceiving it or anyone else. So it just exists in its own right, which also means it exists inherently in that it's inherent in it that it's this world. It doesn't depend on someone calling it a world or a reality or what have you. You don't need a mind to perceive it as such. It just is. And I just happen to see it. So in other words, I see it because it's there, and not that it's there because I see it. That's how it feels, right? It is there. I see it because it's there. I perceive it because it's there. That's how we look at the world. But actually, it's the other way around. It's there because we perceive it. Because there's a mind to perceive something, therefore something exists. Okay? That is the Buddhist view in a really coarse way. And the object to be negated is this idea there's this world out there, and we just perceive it differently. There's a world out there, independently there, objectively there, something that is just, it's in and of itself, it's just its nature, it's there, it doesn't need anything to be this world, it's just over there. Okay, so those are just different words here. So an objective existence, an independent existence. And this is also true not just for the world out there, also with regard to me as a person. There's an I here, there's a self, there's an I. My whole world revolves around this I. And that I doesn't depend on anyone perceiving it or naming it or what have you. The reason I perceive it is because it's there. The reason I refer to it, I give it a name, is because it's there. And because it's there and it doesn't depend on me perceiving it, it doesn't depend on anyone else perceiving it, it doesn't depend on anyone naming it, it exists independently. It exists independently. It doesn't depend on anything such as what I just mentioned. And it also exists inherently in that, again, it doesn't require anything else for it to exist. It's just there. It's just naturally there. This sense that we have, well, that is a wrong sense. That is just does not accord with reality. That is totally unrealistic. And of course, it gives rise to a sense, this is good, this is bad, this is me, this is you. A very kind of clearly set out world that, although I'm actually just creating it mentally, me doing it, I'm not aware. And even if I'm aware I'm doing it, I forget. And I don't realize that I've just named these things. Instead, I believe I've named them because there are this already. And therefore, there's this objective, independent I and others and so forth. And I'm just calling it what it actually is. All right. Now, this was just brief, not much time for now. And I'll leave it at that. Again, I didn't make time to answer questions. All right, it just says there's one brief question, so I'll just answer that. Would you explain briefly if wisdom can eliminate afflictive emotions, what can strengthen wisdom? Well, love, compassion, and so forth, they strengthen wisdom. They're in accordance with reality already, or they can at least accord with reality. So bodhicitta, absolutely bodhicitta, love, compassion. So whatever level of love, compassion you have, well, work further on it, get a better understanding of what they refer to. Well, love, the wish for others to be happy, the sincere wish for others to be happy, unconditional love, compassion, the wish for others to be free from suffering, again, unconditional. And of course, the wish to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings, bodhicitta. So those minds, they strengthen wisdom. And of course, you have a discussion group that is going on. It'd be good if you would join that. It definitely helps some of the parts that I just don't have enough time to explain. Well, you could clarify them there with some older students. Okay, great. Now, um, coming to the meditation. Now, well, we've done a little bit. What I would like to do is um, to start off with rejoicing. Just get us into what I would like you to do. Um, that is generating bodhicitta and then rejoicing, and thereafter to reflect on just a little bit that I talked about before about the object to be negated and so forth, our sense of reality. Really just going over everything we've done here so that you can take this and bring this into your next week, kind of make this your main practice. All right, so let's start this. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit, I'll be a little bit over time today. I won't be able to finish totally on time, but we'll have 15 minutes to meditate. So let's start right away with a little bit of breathing. And so let's now take a moment to strengthen our determination to reach the enlightened state of a Buddha. In order to be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings who right now are completely immersed in so much suffering and unhappiness, totally under the control of their afflictive emotions. So therefore, out of this wish to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering, since I can't accomplish that right now, as I'm limited myself, therefore, Let's generate this wish to become fully enlightened, so that I'll finally be able to help other sentient beings most effectively to overcome all their limitations and thereby all their sufferings. But in able to accomplish that, I need to generate the wisdom, realizing emptiness. And in order to generate that wisdom, it's crucial to accumulate a lot of positive potential. And one of the most effective practices is to rejoice. So let's take a moment to deeply rejoice in our own positive actions, but even more so in all the virtuous actions of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, heroes, solitary realizers, and all ordinary beings. To generate joy and appreciation. Rejoice in their love, in their kindness, their compassion, generosity, and so forth. And of course, rejoice in the actions that arise from these positive states of mind. Let's also rejoice in their wisdom, in their correct realization of reality, their experience of emptiness. So what is it they've understood in regard to emptiness? What is the object of negation? It is that there is an objective world out there that we all perceive, since it's objectively there. Objective in that it's independent of our own mind. That the fact we perceive it is only possible since it exists in and of itself. And not just the external world, but even the self. Try to identify your own sense of an I. A sense that it's that you perceive it, that you think about it, because it's actually there. It exists independently of your own mind. It's inherent to your mind and body. Try to get a strong sense of this objective, independent way of existence, in particular of your own self. Just remember, that's what we're trying to negate, since that is impossible. And perceiving of such is the main troublemaker in our life. And let's now complete this short reflection on the object of negation. By remembering that we're doing this for the welfare mainly of all sentient beings. To overcome this misapprehension with regard to the self and other phenomena, in order to reduce our self-cherishing, our self-centeredness. And eventually overcome it. And completely purify our mind of all that is actually not in the nature of our mind. Now let's think that whatever positive potential we have accumulated here, learning about and contemplating Nagarjuna's text, may this become one of those many causes and conditions required to become fully enlightened. So that we're able to lead all sentient beings out of their suffering. Whatever virtue we've accumulated and will accumulate in the future, accumulate right now, may that not only become a cause for our own enlightenment, but also reduce the suffering of sentient beings in this world. So let's dedicate this virtue through the words of Shantideva. And let's also think of all the people who are sick and suffering, like Tali Lubin. May she get better very, very soon. And everyone else who's suffering right now, to take them, to think of them while we recite those words. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with the mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Sorry. Oh, this time it's been much longer than I wanted to do this class. But anyway, please remember for this week, don't forget, most important, bodhicitta and rejoicing. And then whatever little you understood or you got from today's explanation on the object of negation, well, try to see whether you can identify yourself that which is to be negated, objective existence. All right, so have a lovely week. Stay well, be healthy, and do your homework. And then I see you again next week. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Yes,
You're
Shema.
welcome.
Thank you,
Okay,
Geshe-ma.
bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. See you again next week.
Bye-bye.